Golf had been working as a project consultant long enough to know that unusual calls came with the territory. So when an unfamiliar number appeared on his phone one evening in 2005, while he was driving back from a provincial work site, he answered it the same way he answered everything, directly, without hesitation. The voice on the other end was elderly, thin in the specific way of people who have spent many years speaking carefully, and it asked without much preamble whether Golf was the person who handled construction and property work. Golf confirmed that he was. The old man said he had a property matter he wanted to discuss in person, something involving a house down a small alley he wanted assessed, and he gave an address and asked Golf to come any afternoon that week. Golf wrote down the address. He noted later that he had memorized it without trying, which was unusual for him, and agreed to come. The call ended, and Golf looked at the note he had made. Soy Sumpersong, the last house on the left with the white fence. He knew the general district. He did not know the alley. He told himself that meant nothing because Bangkok had more alleyways than any map could hold, and went back to thinking about his schedule. He went 2 days later on a Wednesday, driving to the district in the mid-afternoon. He parked near the main road and walked the block. He walked it twice. There was no Soy Sumpersong. There were other lanes, the usual gaps between shop houses, a wider service road running behind a row of commercial buildings, but nothing that matched. He tried calling the number back. It rang without being answered. He waited near the corner for perhaps 20 minutes, sweating in the heat, and finally drove away. He wrote it off as a miscommunication and forgot about it for 2 weeks. When the number called again, Golf was sitting at his desk reviewing plans for a condominium in the Eastern District. The old man apologized immediately, a careful, deliberate apology, the kind that costs something, and said he should have given better directions, that the entrance to the alley was tucked behind the plumbing supply shop on the corner and easily missed if you didn't know to look for it. He asked Golf to try again. He said to come early in the morning, before 6, and that it would be clearer then. He said this with such patient certainty that Golf, who was not a man easily persuaded by vague reassurances, found himself agreeing. He wrote down the new directions. He set his alarm for 5:30. He drove out the following morning in the dark before dawn, following the directions carefully. The plumbing shop, with its steel shutter, rolled down. A narrow gap in the wall marked by a rusted blue gate, a left turn that opened into a lane he could have sworn had not been there before. The lane was dim and overhung with old trees, the houses on either side built in an older style, the pavement buckled by roots. Golf walked slowly to the end of the lane, which terminated in a low wall. There was no one there, no lights anywhere. He tried calling, no answer. He stood at the end of the dead-end alley in the early morning stillness and felt, for no reason he could precisely name, that he should leave. He walked back to his car, sat down, and intended to wait another few minutes before driving home. The next thing he was aware of was darkness and the sound of traffic. It was not early morning dark. It was the full dark of an evening, the sky above the windshield showing the deep blue of well after sunset. His phone read 8:47 p.m. His neck ached from an angle he hadn't chosen. More than 12 hours had passed between the sitting down in the driver's seat at the end of the alley and waking up to find it was nearly 9 at night, and he had no memory of anything in between. He drove home in a daze, told himself he had been more exhausted than he realized, and went to bed. He did not tell anyone. It was his friend Chase who told him something was wrong. Chase reached out the next morning with several missed calls already logged from the previous day, calls Golf had apparently not answered. And when Golf called back, Chase said he had come by Golf's condominium the previous evening because he was worried. Golf had no memory of this. Chase said Golf had been there, that they had sat together for nearly an hour at the kitchen table, that Golf had seemed to be looking through him rather than at him, and that at one point Golf had asked, in a genuinely confused voice, what day it was. Golf had not been drunk. He had not seemed ill. He had simply appeared to be a person who had lost some internal reference point and was trying to navigate without it. Chase had called again after Golf left to confirm he had arrived home safely, and when Golf hadn't answered, had spent the better part of the night unable to sleep. Golf sat with this information for a long moment. He apologized. He said he must have been coming down with something, overworked, not himself. Chase accepted this but watched golf for the rest of the evening with an attentiveness that he tried to make look casual. A few weeks later, Chase suggested they meet at the bar they had been going to for years, a quiet place in an old shop house with slow ceiling fans and wooden furniture, and they sat and caught up, and the conversation felt normal until midway through the evening, Chase leaned across the table and said he wanted to try something. He took a ballpoint pen from his pocket and pressed the tip briefly and precisely to the center of Golf's forehead, just above the bridge of his nose, then withdrew it immediately and looked at the tip of the pen with an expression Golf found difficult to categorize. He capped it. He did not explain. Golf asked what that had been about. Chase said he was checking something, and when Golf pressed him for more, Chase said that the answer would take longer than tonight to give properly and change the subject to other things. It was Chase who introduced Golf to Victor several weeks after that. Victor was a man in his early 60s who had built a textile manufacturing business from the ground up through the specific combination of patience, precision, and willingness to work at an unglamorous pace that created durable wealth rather than the spectacular and temporary kind. He was introduced to Golf at a dinner arranged through a shared business contact, a small gathering in a private room at a restaurant where the host wanted to bring people together who might find each other useful. Victor shook Golf's hand with a brief, evaluating attention, mentioned that he had a vacation property up north that needed a professional assessment, and said Chase had spoken well of Golf's work. He asked if Golf might be available for an inspection visit in the coming weeks. Golf said he would be. Victor nodded once, thanked him for coming, and turned to speak with someone else. It was only on the drive home, when Golf mentioned to Chase that Victor had the look of a man who hadn't been sleeping, that Chase said, quietly watching the road, that Golf was right, and that he hadn't been, and that the reason for it would become clear soon enough